Islam in Canada. Islam in Canada is the second largest religion after Christianity. Muslims have lived in Canada since 1871, and the first mosque was established in 1938. According to the 2021 Canadian National Census, 1,775,715 people, or 4.9% of the total population, are Muslims. In large cities such as the Greater Toronto Area, 9.6% of the population is Muslim, and in Greater Montreal it is 8.7%. Most of them are Sunni, while significant minorities are Shia and Ahmadiyya. Early history. Some historians say that Islam was first brought in 1492 when slavery occurred in North America. At that time, Muslims in North America sailed from the Gulf of Mexico to the Mississippi River, south of Manitoba and Saskatchewan. But there are also those who say that African Muslims who were brought to the American region were enslaved. The status of Muslims was unilaterally released when they came to Canada. Then later, namely 1833, slavery was abolished in Canada. Historians claim that slavery in Canada did exist. However, it has not received much scholarly attention, so not much can be learned from it. Regarding African Muslims seeking freedom in Canada, Muhammad Bakwaqa can be used as one example. At that time, he settled for some time in Chatham. It was in this place that he wrote the Traces of Islam in the form of an autobiography that made him famous. The book tells that in 1854, the year he arrived in Canada, 3 Muslims were already living in Canada. Besides Muhammad Bakwaqa, 2 other Muslims were the young couple James and Agnes Love, who immigrated from Scotland in 1851. Both were among the first recorded Muslims in Canada. Other historians say the first Muslim from Scotland was known as Wazir Beg, a medical student from India who studied at the University of Edinburgh in 1858 to 1859. In 1871, another Muslim family arrived in southern Ontario. The young couple were identified as John and Martha Simon. They were born in the United States but were the children of immigrants from Europe. Modern era. 4 years after Canada's founding, in 1867, the 1871 census found 13 European Muslims among its population. The first Muslim organization in Canada was registered by immigrants from Greater Syria living in Regina, Saskatchewan in 1934. The first Canadian mosque was built in Edmonton in 1938 when there were approximately 700 European Muslims in the country. The building is now part of a museum in Fort Edmonton Park. The years after World War II saw a small increase in the Muslim population. However, Muslims remained a minority. It was not until the abolition of European immigration preferences in the late 1960s and early 1970s that Muslims began to arrive in significant numbers.
Growth. Islam is the fastest growing religion in Canada. According to the 2001 census, the number of Muslims in Canada was 579,140, or about 1% of the Canadian population. In 2006, it was estimated at 800,000, or 2.6% of the Canadian population. According to the Pew Research Center's 2010 census data, their number reached 940,000. The number of Muslims there is also expected to grow due to the rapid influx of immigrants over the past 2 decades. This growth is influenced by the higher fertility rate of Muslims compared to other populations. In 2001, the fertility rate of Muslims in Canada averaged 2.4 children per woman compared to 1.6 children per woman in the rest of the Canadian population. In recent years, Muslims have also experienced rapid growth in Calgary and Edmonton due to economic booms. Mosque. There are approximately 90 mosques spread across Canada. The first mosque in the country was the Al-Rashid Mosque located in Edmonton and was established in 1938. Bosnian and Albanian Muslims were the founders of the Jami Mosque, Toronto's first mosque in 1968, whose reconversion into a mosque, originally an old Catholic school building, occurred on June 23, 1973. The mosque was reconverted for Bosniaks, with support from local Christians. Later, through the actions of University of Toronto professor Kadir Baig, the mosque was purchased by Asian Muslims, while Albanians and Bosniaks later founded the Albanian Muslim Society and the Bosanska Jamija Bosnian Mosque, respectively. Toronto's oldest mosque, with the oldest minaret in Ontario, built in the Ottoman style, is in Etobicoke, part of the Bosnian Islamic Center. Canadian Muslims thrive at the hands of immigration. Hidden behind the hustle and bustle of its neighboring country, the United States, the growth of Canadian Muslims is quietly increasing rapidly. Reported from the official website of the Muslim Association of Canada, MAC, Canadian Muslims have diverse ethnic backgrounds. The majority of Muslims who now live in the largest country in North America are immigrants from various countries, such as Pakistan, the Middle East, and Indonesia. Meanwhile, there are about 1/5 of Canadian Muslims who were born in Canada. Although most Canadian Muslims were born abroad, Jennifer Selby noted in the report above, the native birth rate of Canada continues to increase. There are also a small number of converts, but no statistical data is available.
The majority of Canadian Muslims, like most other Canadian immigrants, live in the province of Ontario. There is also a significant Muslim population in the province of Quebec and British Columbia. According to Selby, Canadian Muslims are the fastest growing population. In May 2001, there were 579,645 Muslims in Canada, or about 2% of the total population. The Muslim population experienced the most significant increase during 1991 to 2001. Initially from 0.9% in 1991, it jumped to 2.0% of the total Canadian population. The 2011 Canadian census predicted that the total Muslim population would increase by around 160% by 2017. The latest 2013 census stated that the Muslim population had reached 2.8% of the total 32.8 million Canadian population. This number places Islam as the largest minority religion in Canada. Christianity is still the country's majority religion. The increase in the number of converts in Canada has recently also sparked the government's interest in researching the reasons why its citizens converted to Islam. They funded a project by an Australian academic, Professor Scott Flower, to conduct the study. Canada is a country that does not have a single journal article about converts. I think this is a great opportunity, said Scott Flower. The study, entitled Towards Understanding the Extremely Rare, Distinguishing Ordinary Processes of Religious Conversion from Violent Extremism, received a Kanishka project grant of $169.2 thousand Canadian dollars. Although Scott Flower admitted that he did not know how the government would use the results of his research. Immigrants still dominate Canada's Muslim population. More than 60% of Canadian Muslims are immigrants who came to Canada in the last 20 years. The Canadian Muslim community is an urban phenomenon, the Canadian Dawn Foundation wrote in a report titled Canadian Muslims, a Statistical Review. The arrival of Muslim immigrants to Canada is largely influenced by changes in Canadian immigration policy and the political economic turmoil of Muslims in their countries of origin. Recently, Sheila McDonough and Homa Hoodfar revealed in Muslims in Canada, from ethnic groups to religious communities, Muslim immigrants who came to Canada came from the middle and upper middle classes. She noted that only about 17.6% had less than a high school education. The official website of the Canadian government states that the country absorbs more than 200,000 immigrants each year, with a total population of more than 32 million people. In his study in the early 1990s, Ahmad F. Yusuf outlined 5 main factors that attracted Muslims to immigrate to Canada: economic opportunities, educational opportunities, political alienation, kinship, and the guarantee of religious freedom in the Canadian Constitution are the 5 main factors. In the country whose capital is Ottawa, Muslims enter various fields, including politics, social, economic, and academic. There are also a number of organizations that focus on handling the problems of the Muslim community. Among them, the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, the Canadian Islamic Congress, the Council of American Islamic Relations, CARE, Canada, and the National Council on Canadian Arab Relations. Most of these Muslim community organizations are located in the Greater Toronto area. Islamophobia. The rise of Islamophobia in the West has had a major impact on the rise of anti-Muslim sentiment across Canada. Several politicians have called for a return to the ban on wearing the hijab in public spaces. Politically, relations between the Canadian Muslim community and Prime Minister Stephen Harper had deteriorated earlier this year. Harper's statement calling mosques the center of Islamic radicalization sparked protests from Muslims and opposition parties. The situation eased following a statement by Canadian Defense Minister Jason Kenney. Kenney admitted that he often visits mosques and Islamic communities. Last Ramadan, Stephen Harper even invited Muslim community leaders to break the fast together at his residence. However, various methods have been used to fight and prevent these symptoms, both formal and cultural, starting from establishing interfaith meetings to flower-laying actions. We want to educate the public to react in the right way to Islamophobic movements, said Mohammed Noor, Deputy Chairperson of the Islamic Association Relations Council in Windsor. Another initiative was carried out by the National Council of Canadian Muslims. The institution created an anti-criminalization website against Muslims. Early last June, Statistics Canada released 2012 crime data. A total of 45 cases were found to have a hate or Islamophobic motive. Some Canadian Muslims are reluctant to report cases of Islamophobia they receive to authorities. The presence of the website is a bridge for the Canadian Muslim community to report incidents they sometimes experience. According to Noor, the Canadian Muslim community needs to be educated to be moderate. The community needs to be taught about how to respond back and how to position themselves to avoid negative perceptions from Islamophobes. Some mosques and Muslim families use cultural touches to erode people's misunderstandings of Islam. The Chowdhury family, for example, the Canadian Muslim family invites 14 non-Muslim Canadians to chat every Sunday. Several other families do the same thing. They invite non-Muslims to chat and have lunch together. Through these meetings, they want to bridge differences. There are more similarities that unite us than differences that might separate us, said Marilyn Lafrate, a non-Muslim resident from Vaughan who accepted the invitation of one of the Muslim families. Early March, a Muslim group in the city of Edmonton distributed white roses as a message of peace and removed anti-Islamic sentiment through the action. More than 500 roses were distributed to people in the city center.